Now, one other interesting area that we were discussing was the role of artificial intelligence in politics. And in particular, yes.
Okay, it's interesting after, okay, democracy is defined by Aristotle, only works under two assumptions. One, everyone is educated. Two, everyone participates. If not, it just doesn't work. And I think this last election shows that our democracy is kind of failing, in my opinion. And the problem is we have a population of people who aren't that educated, and it's hard because everyone thinks they deserve a right. But at the same time, someone who's gone to college, been educated, studies all this stuff, this is my take. His voice gets canceled out by some dude who's never gone to something, doesn't know politics, votes against his own interests. So it doesn't work that way anymore, and I don't think it's going to get any better. So my take on it is either a certain part of the population votes, or the AI will do it. Because the thing about AI, which I've seen, is they may be able to think of things we can't think of. They may be able to see possibilities that we don't, and they could make possibly better decisions than us. That's just me. I've become a little cynical ever since our last election, and when I see some of the people out, I'm just like, God. But so that's why I think AI probably has some role. I mean, it can already diagnose diseases pretty well, on par, if not better, than doctors. Who says it can't choose a better economic plan?
I would say there are definite applications of artificial intelligence in politics. I don't think AI has advanced far enough to make decisions yet about outcomes, but the U.S. Transhumanist Party, for instance, supports the use of AI algorithms to determine the boundaries of political districts, because that is a more objective and likely neutral outcome than the current way of determining political districts, which is through lobbying by the two major political parties to carve out so-called safe districts for themselves, which have very unusual shapes.
Like all around. Yeah, I've seen that. Gerrymandering is the word my stepdad always used to bring up. It makes it so an area that would be more democratic, like even Texas would actually be democratic, but because this district is so weird, it comes out Republican.
Yes.
So actually, it's very interesting. How I think America would be probably mostly Democratic if it weren't for redistricting in the prison industrial complex.
I would say if all of the obstacles to truly representative politics were removed, America would be neither Republican nor Democratic. There would probably be tens of political parties, and in each election it would be a toss-up as to which party essentially gets significant influence. There would probably be no majority in Congress. There would have to be coalitions like in parliamentary democracy.
Yeah, that's one of the downsides, I think, of democracy, is too much indecisiveness amongst the population. Like, I'll give you an example. One was talking about India was comparing itself to China in this one article. An Indian guy was saying, yeah, the democracy's like great and all, but a lot of times we're just so indecisive on things, we can never get anything done. And then whereas China, they're like, build a road right away. So that's just my take, is like, do you think at one point we will get out of a two-party system and join, say, like a one-party system? Is that even possible?
I don't think a one-party system is the desirable way to go. I would go in the other direction of
more parties,
hyper-pluralistic society, but with limits on the scope of impact that democracy can have. Yeah. So, for instance, there shouldn't be a vote on what you may or may not have for dinner. That should be entirely your individual choice. And likewise, a lot of matters should not be put up for a vote. It should just be a matter of what do people have the right to do on their own initiative. Yes, private property, private institutions, making an impact, or have some sort of set of rules that is defined in advance, that is objective, and people know how to operate within the parameters of that system. So for instance, if you do have public roads, you have rules of the road that people follow, and you don't need to vote on whether you can turn left on a particular street. That's already predefined.
We decided to vote on no more stop signs. Yeah, because that's the one thing I always wondered. I've always found quite off-putting about politics is the two-party system. Third parties, no. Okay, there's like every now and then one gets a seat in like Congress somewhere, and Jesse Ventura was one time the independent governor of
Minnesota.
Yeah, Minnesota. Bring down SmackDown. Anyways, libertarian. Yeah, it's so it's really hard for. It's either like you said, choice A or B, but we want neither. You know?
Right.
So
because I've been waiting for what you just said was, I think we have a major problem with the way our ballots are done. I've mentioned that in the previous meeting. I think a lot of times choosing A or B. What about having the option of saying, I don't care either way, and I'm just not going to put an X in between.
Exactly.
So let's have some type of scale, because a lot of times we are forced to vote when we don't care at all about the issue.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, and some people do care about the issue, and so we should let their vote count more than my vote when I don't really care. It's like put an X on, like somewhere between the two spots instead of an X in the boxes. And somewhere in between to show how much you care one way or the other.
That's good. It's almost like saying, I don't know. And as a result,
then you go right in the middle. But sometimes you say, well, I'm leaning towards this stuff, but I don't want to give it a full vote.
But then do they count that as like a quarter vote, or do they count that as all? What did they
put it on a scale. Put it on a scale so
then we add numbers up.
Wherever it is, like you could have 100 points or 10 points or something like that, just somewhere along there, and that's that determines what your vote is. Now, people would say, well, that's going to be fixed anyway, because if people don't care, they're going to be voting randomly. But that's not the case. A lot of times people, like, let's say if somebody's running for Congress, okay, person whose last name starts with an A is more likely to get a vote than somebody whose last name starts with a Z. It's so there's
psychology.
There's just all kinds of variables, and plus a lot of different things when things are put on ballots is what they call them. Sometimes the name of
how they phrase
more attractive. Yeah, and it's like fortunately there's too much marketing involved in politics, and so people should be able to give the option of saying, well, I don't really care. I don't feel strongly one way or another, but maybe I'm a little leaning towards this idea. But as soon as they put it,
there's a show called Futurama. There's these race of people called the neutrals, and they're like, how do you feel? I have no strong feeling one way or the other. That's a good point. Yeah, we're offered A or B, but we want neither. But we don't get that choice. So that's why I've had the problem. Is it seems like we're always like a house divided can't stand. And what's it going to take for humanity to just become like a one world government, one world nation? Do we have to find aliens or what? It's just, Socrates is cool and all, but after a while, like too much nationalism could turn bad really fast. Thinking we're so much better. I hate this idea that some people think American lives are worth more than other people's lives, third world children's lives, refugees' lives. It makes me sick, dude. We're all human beings. We're all one big family. We're on this planet. We're all gonna live, or we're all gonna die. So we have to work together as one and not just get so caught up with borders and race and religion. I used to be really mad against religion because I was a hardcore atheist when I was younger, but now I've become much more peaceful, much more tolerant, and I don't want to take away your belief. And guess what? I can't do it. Like you have to do that. And so no longer do I go on these vendettas. I just try and, instead of do something bad, I try to be more constructive and just tell people about science and try and help them out, and we can have a talk, but I'm no longer trying those old things I was used to doing. What was I saying?
Yes,
two parties,
right.
Party. So what do you think, so we'll have more parties, but then how, so Yeah, continue. So
Yes.
instead of one party, let's think about more than two.
Yes, so there are many ways to improve the voting system, by the way, to create more representative outcomes than the current first past the post system. One possibility would be proportional representation, where people who don't get the majority of the votes still get, say, seats in a legislature or another type of influence proportional to how many votes they've actually received. Another possibility, which the US Transhumanist Party employs in its internal ballots, is ranked preference voting, where people don't just vote for one choice, they rank order all of the choices, and then there could be multiple rounds of instant runoffs if necessary, where the person or option that gets the lowest number of number one votes is eliminated in the first round, and then in the second round, people who voted for that person as their number one choice get their number two choices moved up to number one, and then the tabulation keeps going until there are two choices and one of them will necessarily have a majority, or there are more than two choices left but one of them still has the greatest number of number one votes. And there are other voting systems that have been proposed. Almost all of them provide a fairer outcome than the first past the post system that we have today. The problem is that system right now is entrenched because both the Republican and Democratic parties want it to be that way, and in order to break through that logjam, essentially both of those parties need to be thoroughly discredited in the minds of the general public. They're already doing a lot of that work.
Yeah, right now, both the right and the left
Yes.
are both just making people like, what are you doing?
Yes, they are no longer anything that could be referred to as moderate or centrist.
Credible or anything.
We have a president essentially who has tried deliberately to separate families at the border, but we have his opponents calling for public harassment of officials in his administration and his supporters. We have his opponents who are ostensibly in solidarity with immigrants and outraged at the separation of these families, as they should be, nonetheless calling for escalating tensions with Russia and kind of on the borderline of risking war with Russia right now, and certainly demonizing anything Russian. So there's a clear inconsistency there.
When did this happen? Demonizing Russia again?
Well, the whole attempt to essentially pinpoint the blame on the 2016 election outcome on Putin's government, which is really fairly, let's say, specious line of argument. There has not been clear evidence to suggest that the 2016 election was affected by foreign influence. There may have been attempts at influence, but people voted the way they did. We are the sensible, moderate, even centrist alternative. We are the party that focuses on policy. We're not the party that focuses on essentially just beating down the other side, so to speak, or tribalism, or identity politics. We are not the party that simply wants. Yes, exactly. We're not the party that simply wants to win the next election and be as shocking and outrageous and show that the other party is the greatest evil possible who will bring about the end of the world.
I don't see AI really pertaining in like votes directly or creating legislation anytime soon. Well, I mean, it depends how you define soon. 15 years from now, you'll probably start seeing human level general intelligence and robots, and that is something that should be discussed and was discussed in Congress in 2017. So you do see government starting to talk about AI more now. The UK Parliament even had a conference about it. And the main issue, I think, with AI, automation, and robotics right now is with job loss. And I think I read by 2015, already 4 million jobs have been lost because of that. And self-driving cars are about to wipe out one of the number one jobs, which is driving, right? Self-driving trucks and delivery jobs and taxis. Those are about to just be wiped out. And one of the main ways to integrate this properly is what you've heard of as universal basic income.
Yes.
That's one of the most talked about ways, which is actually a lot more helpful than I thought it would be. The studies have shown that there's a lot of social growth that occurs in communities that have been tested with UBIs, and so that's actually a lot more promising than I thought it would be.
Yes, and that makes sense because with a universal basic income, people don't have to worry about subsistence and they can be creative even when it comes to ways of making a living. So somebody can start a small business and maybe it will succeed, maybe it will fail, but at least they've gotten a chance to implement an idea that probably would never have been put into practice if they absolutely had to make a living right now. Some people could be artists, some people could be writers, some people could engage in work that is useful and productive but maybe not monetarily remunerative, say going around cleaning litter in public spaces.
One of the main arguments for UBI is for when science technology starts dominating society, and so that we can provide wealth to individuals who start losing their jobs, and that's what's occurring right now. I think it'd be a lot better to do that sooner than later, so that we can learn more. And I think one of the main arguments is that people will just use the money for drugs and whatnot, but the results of studies have shown that that's not the case.
A big part of AI in politics, though, is what is the definition of AI? Okay, and one of the things that when I studied artificial intelligence back in the 1970s, the whole subject area was how to make computers like humans.
Yeah.
Okay, was how to make, like for instance, a question that would be asked is when you ask somebody, what day is today? And they say, well, today's Sunday. Okay, but then the question is, how did you know that? How did you figure that out? Okay, so computer, the goal was to teach a computer to answer that question the same way a human would. Whereas now that's not the case anymore. Now AI is all about making computers better than humans, do it in a better way than humans. And so when it gets to politics, if we were still doing AI as a way of making computers to be like humans, then I would say computers should be given the right to vote just like humans do. But if we are creating a world where computers are going to be better than humans, the question becomes, should we just let the computers vote for us?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
I'm saying that if we did that, there won't be a vote because computers are all going to agree on the same thing because there's really, most of the time, there's only one best answer.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so I'm not saying that I know the answer, but I'm saying that's the discussion.
They're not going to just be like a bunch of Albert Einsteins either. They're going to be super intelligent, and they're going to become even more intelligent, and that should be occurring fairly soon too.
That's your point. I was going to say is that that's what I'm talking about.
We could do away with reality.
That's what I'm talking about. But ever since this last election, it's kind of shown that maybe at some point that will be the option because they will be smarter. They can make really, really good choices.
It'd be like monkeys trying to tell us how to run politics. It's like we've never
get out of here, you monkey.
The caution, though, that I would have is humans currently still do design AI algorithms, and they will continue to do that for the foreseeable future. As long as the AI algorithms remain narrow and under the control of human designers, it's possible to introduce what's called algorithmic bias, in the sense that the algorithms... once you run the algorithm, it operates the way it's programmed to operate, but the way it's programmed, the initial assumptions, the data inputs might be skewed toward a certain outcome that was the result of bad human decisions.
How do you remove human influence from designing AI?
The one thing about AI I always say is how do we incorporate the human touch in there so that once it gets super smart, it doesn't just wipe us out?
Well, I think
maybe that's
Generally
the best solution.
speaking,
Called a
Wait, that's the best question.
Maybe that's the best solution.
Best solution.
well, I don't want humankind to be wiped out,
No,
but
I'm
my
just
hope is
saying that you see it in all the movies where it's like, all right, turn it on, and then they turn it on and they wipe us out.
But the question has to become, what is best for humanity? Okay?
Yeah.
And wiping the human race isn't the best thing
Right.
for humanity.
Mhm.
So as long as robots,
Do the best thing
clear
that's
that
for
we're
humanity.
asking robots to decide what's best for humanity. Not what they think is best, but what really is the best. And
Yeah, that's some. Or also, I always worry. It's like, all right, we gotta cut half the population. Oh man, I don't think of that. It's always those. You always gotta think of like the worst case scenario because this is really powerful technology that we're dealing with, and that's what was said about voting people. Robots eventually voting, and the reason I say this now is because honestly, people, just aren't going to be able to keep up with the rapid changes in technology that are going to occur over the next 20 to 30 years. And they're just going to be at a total loss. And also, honestly, people don't know, some people are just really dumb and don't know what's good for them. So, I honestly think a robot would be better.
well, my view is greater intelligence at least tends to correlate with greater morality. Not always, but in many
Most
cases.
cases.
So I think it would help to have truly intelligent systems involved in the political process. That being said, my hope is for humankind to also become more intelligent and for there not to be such a clear bright line between human and artificial forms of intelligence, but rather having them be integrated, whether it's Ray Kurzweil's idea of merging with machines or more prosaically, it's a question of not just having these tools at our disposal, but having these tools give us part of the picture that enables us to then take into account other information and make the decision. That is essentially how we could be integrated with AI, even if we're not configured in terms of our brains becoming positronic, for instance, but rather we would have the tools, essentially, and the insights to use our judgment more intelligently. That's one possibility that is more immediate, I think.
Yeah, exactly. We just need to be, that's why I said, we need to be smart and we all need to participate for it to work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have people who are just going to be dumb and choose to be dumb and don't take bother to research and stuff like that, I just don't think those people should be allowed to vote. I'm sorry, because they're not an informed voice. So why should they don't even understand climate, so why should they get a vote on climate change? They don't understand it.
Well, I think the solution to that is...
But you get what I'm saying?
The solution to that is limit the scope of voting to situations where essentially there's no viable alternative to majority rule or rule by whatever outcome the voting system favors.
Or maybe that's not even in the ballot. That's already just they're going to do it and they don't need the population's decision. I don't know. I just see us always being kind of held back by half of our country who doesn't want to basically get on board with what established scientists has already said. There's so many billion years old. Evolution is true. There's not flat. Basic things we take for granted. Half of the U.S. is still believing, and we have to carry along their voices and their opinions. Some might be good, but some are just way out of date. And it's just going to slow us down, and that's why I go with the AI voting.
Well, science should never be politicized to begin with. And that, I think, is important to recognize. Nobody should vote on what scientific theory is likely to be true or well supported or not well supported.
I'm just saying that's just how out of touch they are, and that they're going to make informed choices about our country based on the knowledge that the Earth is 1,000 years old, it's flat, and evolution's not true. So you see, if they don't know those basic things, how can they? I just say, if you don't know those things, you're not going to be the most educated, not going to be able to make the most informed choices. I mean,
well, I'd have the caveat that people's level of knowledge or ignorance may vary across areas. So somebody may be a really good plumber or a really good carpenter, but have no understanding of evolution.
Yeah,
that
but
person
you shouldn't be able to then vote on it if you don't know anything about it.
And that person, I agree, should not
And then
be able to vote on anything
And then if he
related
asked
to
me if I could
evolution.
vote on plumbing, I'd say no, I can't vote on plumbing. I don't know anything about that.
So I think the problem is we have voting right now being put forth in terms of these package deals. Like you vote for one party or the other party, and there are two packages which really each contain a lot of unsavory and counterproductive, anti-progressive elements, whether you pick the Republican package or the Democratic package. They also contain a lot of elements that are not logically related to one another.
Yeah.
So if people could pick and choose in terms of particular issues, particular stances, that would be a superior type of system. Also, if the scope of politics were narrowed, I think that would help, because nobody should be voting on what's the best way to install a pipe in a building. There are some objective scientific and engineering considerations for that. Likewise, nobody should vote on whether evolution is true or what the extent of climate change is. Again, scientific inquiry and investigation are the ways to discover that, and majority opinion has often been wrong in matters of science before. There were times when majority opinion held that the Earth was flat or that the Earth was the center of the universe, and people who disagreed were considered heretics, and they were forced to recant or even executed.
Yeah, that is true, but it's kind of a little bit different with climate change, because it's not so much like ideology as we have all these different branches of science converging on one single thing, and that is that the climate is definitely changing. And to ignore that is just to basically put your head in the sand. I know majority doesn't always rule. I know that for a fact, and but when you have all these people, all these eminent scientists, not just people, scientists, all converging on one same fact, it gets pretty controversial. And another thing is like the majority always. That's the other thing I was going back to. The majority always rules when it comes to voting. Well, what if like 30% of the population is like the really smart ones, 70% of them are dumb ones, just because they outnumber us, just because people, those ones outnumber us, does that make it right? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's one of those things I come to that I'm always thinking about, and I'm just like, no, it doesn't make any sense.
So it's important that essentially, in as many cases as possible, a majority does not get to force its will upon a minority, because you could often have situations where the minority is actually more correct, at least in some respects.
Exactly.
So the best solution is to let free inquiry and discussion continue.
Exactly.
And generally speaking, if you do have truly free inquiry and discussion and people are interested in the pursuit of
They'll
truth,
go to the right one.
yes, and they'll go to that without coercive force binding them.
That's what I was watching things like let the other side, these protesters, let them speak, because he said that if the fools will expose themselves because they are fools. If they just let them talk, you'll see how unprofessional they are. So it's like one of those things where instead of shouting and like not listening, let's have a conversation, and then people can listen and make a decision.
Yes, and well, one of the objectives of these Enlightenment salons is to facilitate this kind of conversation. So I hope that our viewers enjoyed the multifaceted discussion that we had today, and have taken away from it aspects that could help in their own lives, be it in the pursuit of health and longevity, or in the understanding of science, or in thinking about how to improve political systems. With that, thank you very much to all of our guests, and I hope that everyone watching has a good remainder of their day.